To kickstart this session, Pete, could you kindly share a little bit more about yourself, what you do, what is your experience?
Yeah, thank you, Lydia. It's great to see so many folks here. I mean, hope you all had a nice break. Bright and early on Tuesday. Some people worked already on Monday. So yeah, Pete Karumo is the name, or in Finnish, Pete Karumo. I haven't heard that pronunciation in many, many years. I've lived 25 years roughly outside of Finland. So I really appreciate this opportunity to talk here. I think it's when it says, could your next job be here? I hope nobody thinks that, I am a recruiter or something, but maybe very quickly, while I have lived quite a bit abroad, I've also worked a little bit in Finland, originally from Finland. And I was very excited to talk to Lydia and if I can help out anybody about this topic, especially in the startup scene, getting a job and how to market yourself, maybe. I do have a bit of I guess, a lot of experience. I don't know if I can call it a track record, but I have worked about that 25, 30 years. And I've actually applied and got a job maybe three times. And those are all big corporations like Oracle, Nokia, Texas Instruments, and I guess I don't want to go into details, but Nokia, they were hiring everyone. It was my early stages. So that was fairly easy, but I really wanted to work for Oracle. It took me almost 2 years to get there. And Texas Instruments, it was an amazing experience, global scale. Again, serving Nokia, I thought, they hired me because I speak Finnish. I was actually in France at the time. But what I'm trying to say is that I really wanted to work with those companies, and it took me a long time to get there, uh, and to learn the tricks of the trade in highly competitive markets. I don't know, Nokia maybe wasn't, but I left those companies a few years later, and I always wonder why did I chase for a company for 2 years? I thought I wanted to work there, and then I leave after 2, 3 years. And the other companies, and I'm not saying they're bad companies, but I'm just saying that all the other jobs that I worked for are a lot of scale-ups, startups, and it has almost never been a sort of a answering a job application. Uh, I've worked in France, I've worked in Singapore, especially Southern France. They're both highly competitive markets. We can talk about those. Really tough to get a job. Southern France purely because they were like three big companies to get hired to, and Singapore is highly competitive. And now in Finland, back for 2 years. This is my fourth, I guess, a big company, Helsinki University. I didn't apply there either in a traditional way, if you will, applying to a job advert. So I thought maybe I have two words to say how to get hired in general, but especially in the startup world. So thank you, Lydia, for introduction. That was a bit of a longer thing, but I think that I wanted to tell you guys, why I'm here. And yes, I have had long bouts of unemployment as well in between jobs. When I came back to Finland, I was lucky to get a small paying job through my couple of friends. I still have a couple of old friends here. But then I was looking for a job for over a year. Nobody knew me in Finland, having been away for so long. And I got basically recommended to this particular job, and I was very, very lucky, but it took a year, paying everything out of pocket, didn't get any unemployment benefits or stuff like that. Um, but it was interesting how I got that job. And yes, I run a program now, which is basically impact business or social impact, social entrepreneurship. And you can actually, I can see that my background is still about the previous call that I was just got out of, social development goal program, which is organized by the UNDP in APAC, where I guess I spent quite a lot of time the last 12 years. And so it's basically through experiences, through knowing people. I think that's sort of how I've got finally those things that I wanted to work for. But I'm happy to take any questions. And I know there were some questions already, Lydia, right? And I don't know how you want to run this, but Thank you for having me, and feel
Mm-hmm.
free to send, questions to me or Lydia
Mm-hmm.
even afterwards. Thank
Mm-hmm.
you.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. I actually have a big list of questions on 2 pages, but
Okay.
I will not ask all of them. So I suggest we do it this way. I have 4 questions of my own, and 3 of them about getting hired as an international. And I also collected questions from you guys. Many of you left a question, and I picked 3 top ones. So I would like to ask them as well. And you will have a chance to also ask any questions live if I haven't picked yours. And now it's 10:09. I suggest I will stop with my questions at 10:30 latest. So there will still be 15 minutes for you to ask questions. And to move forward from here, Pete, you talked a lot about your experience working for companies, but also you have a lot of experience working for your own company
Yes.
or companies, right? So what I want to ask you, could you say a few sentences about this? And also, what is a startup scene in Finland in
Mm.
general? For example, are there any platforms, programs that people should know about?
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Right. Sure. So I could talk, of course, forever about the startups and scale-ups that I work for, but for the benefit of this particular exercise, um, I always think that I've moved to different countries out of my own pocket because I wanted to go into those. I wasn't an expert or I wasn't transferred anywhere, so I wanted to work in some certain areas. They just happened to be highly competitive, more so than I thought. And I always think that working for a startup can be two things, the driving force. It's sometimes out of necessity, not finding, employment in other way, or it's a passion that just happens to maybe be marinating behind somewhere and you think it's a time is right, right? These things can be combined, of course. You're like, okay, I'll just go for it for my own startup then if I don't get, this and this job. I think the world has changed obviously quite a bit. I think there's a big gig market. I think Finnish market is a lot to do with freelancing, contracts. I mean, I'm in a contract job right now, so it has a beginning and an end at the Helsinki University. It's just the way of the world nowadays. And I think it also makes it interesting. But of course, if you don't have a job and you don't, you're struggling financially, that can be a big toll mentally and financially for your family, yourself. That can be tough, of course, then to launch into a startup. But sometimes you can actually start, and I've had through this program, which Lydia, you've gone also through, there's maybe 1/3 are it's really a passion project, 1/3 are maybe trying to get employed, and 1/3 are a little bit they don't really know. Now, I think it's good to really think, even though it can be hard if you're looking for a job, but really thoroughly think what you want to do, and then which sector, what is your value added? And yes, I'm answering, Lydia, your second question about the Finnish startup market and the areas, but I think it's very important to think that the approach is quite different when you're applying for a job, right? There are still jobs and the market will get better. But I see even here, in Lydia's LinkedIn post and so on that, and this is what we do. We say, okay, I have this and this, I have a background in this and this, and this is who I am. I'm a UX designer, or maybe I'm an accountant, maybe I'm a sales guy. But everybody's doing that, right? And LinkedIn also has the green thing around you. So I think the green is almost enough that and then people get interest in you when you put interesting context, when you write something. Um, I think that's the best and the first step. Don't just say that I'm an accountant, I'm a salesperson or something like that. It's kind of lazy. People are not ever going to pick you from that, I would say. It's very many chances. And this applies to startups specifically because if the job market is really hot, like it was maybe five, well, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years ago in some countries, they might look for some algorithm, some specific skill, but you're still in a long line of people who say, hey, hello, I'm a salesperson. So for startups especially, I think it's really important that you think what is the value that you can bring. Don't say that you're a salesperson, but say, okay, what sector I think I know. So, for example, I have an ICT industry background. I had to rethink this while back because I really couldn't get a job, but then I just forgot the whole thing. No, I just put it aside and said, okay, I know one industry, my nationality, meaning that okay, maybe it has a added value, maybe not. Maybe some people are from Finland, so it's only 5 million people versus I don't know 500 million people. That narrows it down. But of course, languages, but more so is the industry, and then you go for that industry that matches with your experience. If you go from industry A to B, it's much harder. And this is applicable to startups, especially. They're like, okay, this person is good at this industry, and then if I go for that particular startup or that area, then I'm like, okay, what am I good at? Am I good at selling? Am I good at, I don't know, product development? What am I really good at? And you have to really, you can capture that quite quickly. So startups are, in a way, I think, more forgiving because they know they can't necessarily compete with the salary. But nowadays, in Finland and, for example, Singapore, they're quite similar in a way, except Singapore has really high salaries, but don't let that fool you. It's really, really hard to get there because the salaries are so high. So you have to have a double PhD and so on. So startups cannot be that, if they're not, Ivy League, the Supercell or something like that, they can't be that picky. So, but they still want to know what the value is that you want to bring. Now, industries in the startup world in Finland, I think it's very, very wide. I mean, I see it from our incubator programs, Helsinki incubators. We have had 450 teams go through in 2 years. Lots of companies have been created, and they are all walks of life, all industries. And I think, like somebody said, I don't know where, news or YouTube or something, there's never been a better time to be an entrepreneur or work for a startup. Now, I think you have to make a distinction of a startup where you have very, very early and they don't really have any income, and it's really, they're not hiring. Then it's just you're doing pro bono basically. And that's not a bad thing to start, right? You can do a side hustle in a way, or even if you don't have a hustle, if you find people you like and they have a cool startup, you think there's something there, you work for a specific period of time and see if it sticks, if there's something coming up. We have those actually right now at our Helsinki Incubators office, people doing exactly that. And investors are getting interested because why? Because the startups that are interesting for anyone, clients and investors, it's very transparent. You can't hide, right? You can hide maybe in a bigger company, but in startups, you're always the face. And then everybody's like, okay, so I know Lydia, I know Pete, I know somebody else. They have a cool thing. I don't know what they're doing, but they're cool people. Oh, let's find out. Oh, they have a cool thing going. So that can gain momentum by itself. Not necessarily bringing the income, but it's always step to somewhere else. This is very, very early stage. If you really need quick money right now, you have to have several side hustles. But if you want to have like a startup that is maybe making a revenue and maybe they have an investment, this can still be quite early stage. We have 80 companies that have been founded in 2 years, and I would say 40 of them have now got, half of them have got first investment. And first investment usually lasts for 18 months, 1.5 years, right? So one of those things when somebody puts an investment, they're like, okay, can you hire somebody who can do something? And in startups, typically it's either to sell the service or product or develop the service or product. And this, I'm telling very universal facts, but this is how it is, right? And Finland is no different. Now, Of course, Finland has a lot of software companies. It's very much on online and a lot to do with scalability. So you can think about those that, okay, what does scalability mean? What are the companies that are scalable? They're often software that there's a very little uh, uh, time or money to put, some quick prototyping up, and then they go and they try to get clients. So that helps to understand that. But at the end of the day, there's so many industries here, and the best way to approach those, in my mind, because you don't really see them in LinkedIn's or anywhere else, even because they don't have a budget to market, is to go and run around in events. And it's a drag, but that's how I've always found clients or employment in startups or scale ups. You find your area of expertise and you go and talk to people and you do lots of volunteering internships. But more importantly, you just have to talk to people, and people will find out very quickly, okay, Pete is looking for a job, Lydia is looking for a job. Okay, I have something, maybe it doesn't pay much, but that can lead to something, right? So that is the way to do it. And when I got to Finland, I mean, I ran all these I guess I just wanted to scout what is the startup scene here. And I went to the Grid in Napoli, which has a lot of tech startups. I went to Maria IO area, which has a lot of startups as well. There are lots of free events there. You get very quickly, you get to know everyone, and I think that's the best thing. Even though you're maybe desperate getting a job, you're like, okay, well, cool, we'll see what we can find. People know how hard it is, right? So and then there are specific places like urban tech, which is to do with smart cities, smart nations things. There's Boardio. I think it's .io. It's just one guy who's running a show. I think there's maybe two more now, who started with finding board members to startups and scale ups. But there are even job announcements. There's the Hub. And then, of course, you have the government or semi-government initiatives like Work in Finland. I'm sure you can Google all these things, but what you can't Google are the people necessarily, because they can be hiding, they don't have the money to advertise. So I think it's really important to go to these events. But you find, you Google some of these events, you Google some of these accelerators, incubators, what we do. There are so many at the universities, different universities around Finland, that then you just identify something. They have lots of free events. Right now, I'm going to Demola event. They do demos for first, second, third year students, but they always, they're nice people. They're always, oh, okay, you're looking for something, we can help you out. And they are in Tampere, so, and they do stuff, and they're all free events. Nice to have free food, free drinks, and have a nice chat. And why this is the networking is so important, and you kind of have to learn to love that if you want to work in startups, because startups are almost always looking for something as well. Usually they're looking for money, funding, contacts, and so on. So looking for a job is no different. That was a long answer, Lydia, but I think that's sort of the gist of it. Does that answer the question? I don't know.
Yeah, I love it how you speak. I had like five questions in my mind when you were speaking,
Five.
but then you were like answering them one after another. So
Okay,
it
sure.
was very well done.
Thank you.
I think I will actually maybe a very quick one, and then I will go to questions that were asked in a registration form.
Sure.
So we are talking about getting hired by a startup, but what about being an international and looking for a job in a startup? So how open are Finnish startups to hiring international talent?
Hmm. Well, I would put it this way. Startups will not survive if they don't have good people who are good people, meaning they are interested in the startup, right? I'm not talking about two people and a dog in a garage. I'm talking about maybe 5, 10 people. Scale up is maybe, it depends, how you count it, but they need people that can work almost on anything. They can capture very quickly about their product or solution they can sell because startups will not survive if you don't understand what they're doing and sell it better than others. They're fighting for the place in the sun, right? So I would say that having been an international myself in highly competitive markets, I mean, my name is not Finnish. It's not, people are like, okay, what? Big companies, they are, okay, that doesn't sound Chinese in Singapore, doesn't sound French in France. I'm sure, algorithms and whatever, they don't pick me because I'm not specifically qualified to that. But startups is different beast. In my mind, it comes down to the networking first. You have to show your face. It will not happen behind the screen like this because they need to see. It's very important that the chemistry works within a startup. Imagine you have a small team of 10 and that's it, right? Or five. I've been a first employee in a startup where you have four founders. So you just have to see if the chemistry works, and then everything else usually comes after. They started giving me salary straight away, and they said, yeah, okay, we can't give you equity right now, but we can give you a salary. And by the way, this is another discussion we can talk about, the remuneration, because the salaries are not always competitive. But that's not my experience either. In Singapore, I represented the Finnish company that I got introduced to a friend, and my salary was much higher than, not much higher, but it's higher than currently in Helsinki University, which maybe says something about the Helsinki University than the startup. But salaries are not very high in Finland. The salaries are not very high in Finland in general compared to many other countries. So they are looking for more of the personality fit. Of course, you have to have a skill set that you can capture stuff very quickly. Of course, there needs to be some sort of a understanding of the understanding of the solution or the market that they're operating in. Of course, the more you know, it's universal, then you can get a little bit further. But my experience when I've been hiring to startups, if the chemistry doesn't really fit with the founders, you can hire people who are sorry, excuse me, very senior, but it's they might be looking for another job right away once there's an opening, right? So you want somebody who sticks around. So that's why I think as an international, it comes down to getting your foot in the door by networking, and maybe more face to face rather than online. But online can work too in events like these. But I haven't found so much about issue of which nationality I am or a language is or so. And I think that's a little bit the bigger company game where I don't know. It's a mystery to me again because there are different driving forces. I think so that in my mind, it's actually an advantage of being international. My team, although it's Helsinki University, we have three Finnish and seven who are internationals. And we speak English, and the whole university, they're like, who are these folks? We're a bit mavericks there, but it's definitely an advantage because business nowadays, the world is so connected. So if you can bring your flavor of your own country, with languages, with knowledge of maybe your market that can be interesting to that startup, I think that can be a big, big, big advantage actually. When I came back from Singapore, people wanted to send me back to Singapore um, when I came to Finland because I knew the market. I had been there for 12 years and I said, I just got back, right? So, but that was my added value. I have friends who are Singaporean who are in Finland, and that is their added value, opening the markets from within Singapore or to Singapore. It's not so much about everybody speaks English. The other languages, I don't think it's so important. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think it comes down to really the networking effect and finding the people because they can't find you online either, and they don't have the marketing money or recruitment budget to find you. So there's always a better chance. I would say 80%, 80-20 from physical events.
Thank you a lot. One question before we move to the audience. You were, and I noticed that as well, like when a startup has some budget, they tend to hire senior professionals. Of course, they want someone who can come in and start working from day one. But how would you approach a startup being a junior?
Hmm. Well, I'm not a very junior person, so but I have hired junior people in a startup, right? And they were our second and third hires. We were a co-founding team of four. I'm talking through examples, but I have other startups that we've done the same. First hire was a senior person. We typically startups often they need somebody who can bring a Rolodex or they can open the sales market. They need the cash. They need the markets. They know that go for startups that have validated their business ideas and they maybe have an investor. And this is the only way to find out. I mean, you have Deal Room and a couple of other websites on LinkedIn where you can kind of have the idea what the companies are that you should go after, but they're usually more often than not there are these events because they are there to look for customers or something, always looking for something. So especially as a junior, you really need to, I don't know, especially, but you need to be introduce yourself if you can't get introduced by somebody else. Maybe as a senior, for me, it was easier that somebody introduced me, but as a junior, uh, we got to know we learned about these two people that we hired, so hire number two and three, through a couple of events in a university. It was like a demo day kind of thing. um, and they approached us and they just started talking, and I'm sure they had done, I didn't ask them, but they had done homework about our startup, because again, as a startup we're not very well known, even if we've been around for 2 years or 3 years, outside of our very core group and some clients. And they're like, we're very impressed that somebody says, hey, what about this? They know a little bit, and sometimes it goes astray that they don't really, but it doesn't matter. We know that they're juniors, and then we ask, okay, so I don't have a lot of money to give a salary to. Are you interested? It's often a very open discussion. Even the other junior person, so they were straight out of university, and the other one said, "Well, you know what? I don't want to work for a big company. Even if the salary is better, I love this startup. I love the area. The sector, there's an upside and so on." And it was a very deep analysis of our startup, but he was so enthusiastic. And so we gave him salary and they raised, cut higher and higher little by little. And we got a little bit of equity in terms of options, and he became a co-founder later on. So again, goes back to the personalities and the personal touch, and that is not very different to seniors, I think. I mean, I think it's almost the same. I tend not to hire seniors who approach me in LinkedIn, because I think that they can do much better. They've been around much longer. So I would love them to call me or rather see me. Juniors, I can kind of overlook that because if they approach me in LinkedIn, I say, okay, cool. What can you do? To me, it's a less riskier hire because it's often less equity or salary. So again, as a junior, you have energy. So should seniors. Run around, find out all the events that's going on in the startup space in Finland, and introduce. It won't take years to get a job. It takes, depending on you, but there are two, three, four, five events per week. So in a couple of months, you can get something already going. Again, it's not necessarily straight away the salaries that you expect, but it can go up very quickly if you do a little bit homework and you see that the company is going up.
Good answer. And a question asked in the chat, where can I find the information about startup events? So you mentioned go to events, but how do I know where to go?
Hmm. Okay. I think you just have to Google because there's so many, right? I thought about Lydia when you said, can you talk about the events and incubators and accelerators and university? I have a massive list of those because I need to also go and meet them for partnership opportunities and potential startups that might be interested in our incubator. So I also have to sell my services. Um, I don't think there's one resource. I mean, you have the Evites, you take a look at sort of where the social events are advertised, and startups can be advertising there. They are to a degree a little bit hidden. I saw that there's Aalto Startup Center. I mean, we have Helsinki incubators, we have some stuff. So I don't think there's an umbrella. Maybe there's a business there that somebody could collect that where everything is going on. LinkedIn has quite a bit, I think. But I don't think there's one central thing. I don't know, Lydia, if you know this better because you're in this business more. I don't want to put the ball back to you, but maybe you know better.
Mhm. Yeah, of course, Googling helps, but also there are spaces where someone can check future events. For example, Maria 01
Yeah.
has lots of events. Yes, someone mentioned it already. And there is a startup sauna from Espoo. That could be one. And if you
Kiwas
live,
maybe.
Kios, yes. If you live in a smaller city in Finland, I would check your it's like an umbrella for business Tampere or business something. And of course, like if I'm in Tampere, I would check what Tampere University has for startups and go to all the events there. By the way, when I was hanging around Aalto University spaces, I expected them all to be students who are working on their startups or trying to work, but the group was very like diverse. So there were mature startups as well there.
Yeah.
And
I'm basically
Eventbrite,
put I'm
yeah.
basically putting some links here, basically because I just Googled startup events Helsinki, and
Mhm.
Eventbrite is one of those things similar to events. Startup Grind is one thing. Helsinki, of course, then you have the big events like Arctic 15, the Slush. Uh, think about all the co-working spaces like Maria, but it's, Epicenter, the Innovation Home. There's just so many basically that again, there's not one, right? There's not one umbrella thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very good. Maybe someone can work on that. Actually, I wanted to create some kind of a knowledge base where people
I'd
can
love
go
that.
and click through and just immediately go to right places.
I would love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is a little bit of like a more like a career coaching question for you, but I will ask it anyways. So, if you were unemployed for quite some time, it means you need to upskill yourself to be appealing to a startup. And how to convince a startup to give you a chance then in such a case. I hope like I picked up the question right. If I'm wrong, please speak up. But that's what I understood from the question.
Hmm. Yeah. I don't know. Upskilling. Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, again, through an example, I think it's always a good idea to be upskilling, taking free courses. There's lots of those going on as well. You don't have to pay for those courses and volunteering, right? I think volunteering helps. You can do stuff online. I mean, what I'm doing right now with Lydia, I'm volunteering. I mean, I want to understand what it means to get hired in a startup area in Finland. I know the techniques and I've got experience in and having, getting clients as in startups in different countries, Finland included. So volunteering is a great way to do that. I mean, I volunteered with Helsinki Incubators as a mentor. I wanted to be a mentor. I've been a mentor for a long time, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't make me better, right? So I said, okay, here's is there a mentor opportunity? And I know this and that, and okay, that doesn't work, but that works. Or if you do that, then you can do that. Volunteering is a great way to upskill. Um, I don't know if you need to do, some specific certificates. I mean, they cost money, right? Unless you want to do something like what I'm doing, project management. I was just looking at some certificates. They're 600 euros up. I don't know if I would, and it takes a lot of time and money. You can do lots of free courses in through LinkedIn as well. You take a look at those. People do pick up. You post it there. Usually people respond very positively because I think it's a great way of putting yourself out there because it's a lot to do with kind of branding yourself and selling, and that's the other thing we haven't talked so much, but. Uh, Instead of just saying, "Hi, I'm a sales guy, Pete, and I have 25 years experience and I've done this and this company," it's better to say, "Hey, I'm volunteering this and this area." People are, okay, so Pete is knowledgeable about that. He's maybe headed that way, or he's just done a course in, I don't know, public speaking or something like that. That's a great way of and a free way of putting yourself out there that people, okay, so now Pete is maybe a public speaking expert, although he's not, but those are I don't know if this answers your question, but I really think that volunteering, taking free courses is a great idea.
Mm-hmm. There was a clarification that, but I would like us not to go too deep into that space now because the clarification was how to ask for a chance with dignity. And that's why I feel like it's a lot about being a career coaching question.
Mhm.
How to find your strengths, how to find your confidence, how to practice approaching someone. That would be like my answer to this question. But I would like to give a chance for others as well to ask a question about around startup, if it's okay. Yeah, okay. Does someone have a question? Marina, please go on.
Hi. Oh, thank you so much, Pete. It was very insightful. I was wondering, so you mentioned clearly that if for looking in the startup scene in Finland, it's absolutely not about nationality in your view, it's more about personality. So I was wondering how, if you are, I'm not a junior, but I'm not super senior like you either, I'm in between. How do you think of approaching startups just to, because I don't know, to me internships or are very difficult to get if you're not just out of school. So how do you prove, like, how do you, because until you've actually had someone who you've worked with in Finland, you can, in my view, but because I'm not used to networking that much, we don't do it so much in France, but you, until someone, you've proven yourself to someone, no one can really recommend you. You can be a big talker, but it's just fluff. So how do you take that first step? That's the only,
Yeah,
sorry,
yeah.
it was a long question.
No, no, thank you for the question. Very good. And I like it that you're from France. I went to southern France, which is an impossible place to find a job. Everybody wants to be in the sun at the time, especially then. There were three companies that you could get hired to. I got interviewed both two of those, and the other one took a long time to get a job there. But that was a big company. Startups were easier there, and that's what I mean. Um, I was then in my mid-career, I think, or early career, and I didn't know anyone, right? I was just walking around, and the big talker, you kind of have to be a big talker. I mean, when you say it's just fluff, it's unfortunately not. I mean, this is the approach that you is the hardest part, I always say. It's like working for a startup, it's the same thing, right? So they identify with similar people because with startups also, it might be running out of money in 2 or 3 months. They don't necessarily tell you in 1 month. So they have to be big talkers, not lying or BS or anything, but they have to be present, and you have to get outside that comfort zone, unfortunately, which you don't necessarily have to do if you work in a big company. So if you don't know anybody, you have to go to these free events and you have to start talking and get to know people. And very quickly, when you're open and say, "Hey, how you doing? What's going on?" and you can be very open about it in these events as well. If you feel like you talk to people every day, I'm sure, or every week, and you say, okay, so I'm actually looking for a job. Hi, I'm Marine from, being in Finland for whatever, X months, or just came here and I want to get a job and I love it here. Can anybody, help out? And it's as simple as that. But that's the tough part. It is very simple to say that couple of sentences, but I know how mentally it can be very different, very different people, and challenging. Now, of course, that's the first step. But then they say, okay, so Marion, what do you do? And then you say, I work in a textile business, for example, or I work for IT or whatever. Uh, then they say, okay, well, we're not hiring right now, but I know somebody who is, right? And that's how it works. And in Finland, this was surprise to me when I got back to Finland. And again, I'm an older dude nowadays, and nobody knows me. This is a very much of a tip of the iceberg job market, in a way that what you see is like 10-20% of the jobs that are there, and this is all jobs included. I would say startups, it's even maybe 10% or less what you see, again because of they don't have budget to advertise it too much. So, and it's a people business, really. So it goes through getting the first contact, talking to my first thing was I came to July back to Finland. I went to Maria IO because it's the only place that was open in July, and there was an event for recently moved those who recently had moved to Finland, internationals. I think I was probably the only one with the Finnish passport there. But I went there and I got to talking and I got to know some of the first people that I still remember very fondly, who said, okay, I'll help you out. The first person who recommended somewhere was not my Finnish friends way, way, way back, but it was a guy who has an Indian background, doesn't speak a word of Finnish, still has been here 2 decades, but he gave me all these tips how to survive, get a job as an international in Finland. And I'm basically been repeating his words today, very much so. I mean, you just said so many things already about yourself. I mean, you kind of put it in the somewhere between, but now I know you're from France, I'm thinking, okay, who do I know in startup world that might be doing something in the French market? Of course, that's the first thing. So you have to identify, of course, those kind of things. Don't try to get really creative. I mean, you're Marine from France, and that's it. Then you start talking, and that's the beauty of it in a way. It's challenging, of course, but it's easier than applying millions of job applications and getting so many rejections and no shows, and it's just ridiculous. Uh, the best jobs that I've had, and best paying jobs, by the way, have been like that, through this approach to representing. I've actually represented not just Finnish companies abroad, but other nations as well. I'm like, why would British based? I've never been, working in UK, but I represented them because somebody knew that I do this. So little by little, you have to find the way how you do it. But I think it's not only getting like a hire always. There are so many easy ways nowadays doing freelancing. Ukko.fi, ukko.fi. If you're already in Finland, you can, start invoicing. And it's a very low entry for companies to hire you, not just startups. But you said that in the very beginning that it's only, like basically for everyone. It's not everyone. You have to, it's not just you come in and okay, I get a job, and because I'm international, or I run around the events. You have to be very, from the very beginning, what I said, you have to be very clear. What if somebody asked this simple question, what your value added is, you would have to have like 3 bullet points. Hi, I'm Marian from France. Maybe there's a city there. So then, okay, if it's Paris, I'm immediately, okay, I know some companies there or somewhere else. Then I work in this area, I do this and this, and I've done this and this, right? And the third is I'm looking for this and this and this. That's enough. That took like 15 seconds. Now I know Marine from France, from that city, who has that experience and is looking for this and this. And it doesn't, you can say, I'm looking for a job, sure, but what kind of job? Or I'm looking for several, somebody said, should I work for 3 startups? Yes, I think it's a good idea if you have the band. Startups are happy to negotiate those things. They're like, okay, so I don't really have somebody special who's more senior. They're afraid they don't have the salary to hire you full time, so you can work 2 or 3 startups, and you still don't have to do 2 jobs, 10 hours a day or something like that. So that's an easy entry. It gets hard when you become a co-founder. You get so friendly with them, and they invite you as a co-founder. That's when it gets hard because that's usually they say, okay, you get a little bit less salary, you get more equity, and by the way, you work also the weekends sometimes. So it's easy to go freelance route and talk to. And yes, it is a lot of fluff. I'm an introvert by nature, but I had to learn to do this, what I'm doing. Otherwise, I still wouldn't be employed. I wouldn't have lasted 10 years in France or 12 in Singapore. I hope that answers your question.
Yes,
I
it
love
does.
this
Thank you.
last part of yours, that being introverted. And when someone says go to events, and like I as career coach says the same, and I always add that I'm freaked out. I'm like, I don't like events. I don't like, they drain all the energy out of me, but I do that. I
And
still
that
go.
and that's the thing, by the way, because that sets you apart, right?
Mm.
If you just answer job applications through LinkedIn, there's almost a zero chance, unless you have triple PhD, to be picked up to an interview. Yes, there's a chance, but if you do this, you go show your face, you will be in the top 5, 10% because the 90% are like, exactly, this is too much of a job. It's too much, it's emotionally draining unless you're totally an extrovert, but that will get you the openings that you need. And by the way, that's what you need to do in a startup. I mean, you still have to put yourself out there and learn to blah blah a little bit.
Well, thank you a lot for today. We are 5 minutes over
Oh,
time.
sorry. Thank
Can I
you.
ask, can people text you if they have some questions on LinkedIn? Pete,
Sorry?
can people text you on LinkedIn if they still have questions?
Absolutely. Yeah,
I can
definitely.
then share your LinkedIn link when I share the recording of this session.
Absolutely. No problem.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Thank
Lydia, for
you.
having me. I hope there was some useful things there. I'm not in, executive search or anything like that. I kind of don't believe I believe them because they can help you to understand what you need to do, but you also learn it on the field. And I'm not a salesperson, although I might sound like it, but you have to learn to get a job in a startup world.